Arizona Territory, 1883. The sun was barely up over the Red Ridge when Sheriff Quentin Granger found a woman crouched behind the depot with a satchel of silver dollars and blood on her sleeve. He had drawn his Colt before she even turned around. "I did not take that money," the woman said, her voice steady but low, like someone who had already been through worse. She was young, maybe mid-20s, with dark hair coming loose from a braid and eyes that did not flinch when he looked at her. Her dress was dusty, the hem torn. She stood slowly, hands lifted. "Turn around," Quentin said. She did, and he cuffed her wrists with the iron restraint he kept for troublemakers. She did not fight him. That was the part that made something turn in his gut. The silver belonged to the general store's register. It had been taken in the night. The shopkeeper swore he saw someone matching her build and dress running from the alley. That and the blood on her arm was all the evidence they had. Quentin marched her through the street while townsfolk whispered from behind curtains. He unlocked the jailhouse door and led her to the back cell, locking it fast behind her. "What is your name?" he asked. She sat on the cot, straight-backed. "Sylvie Carr. You want to tell me how you came by that satchel of money?" "I found it by the freight carts behind the depot." "You expect me to believe that?" "You are going to do what you are going to do," she said. "But I did not steal from anyone." He stared at her through the bars. "That cut on your arm. You get that falling over the truth." She looked away. "I jumped off a moving wagon 2 days ago. Had no choice." Quentin sighed and leaned against the wall. He had dealt with liars before, plenty of them. She did not look like a thief, and she sure did not sound like one. But looks and sound were not proof. He left her a tin cup of water before locking the outer door. That night, as the desert cooled and the wind pulled through the cracks in the wall, he sat outside the cell room and listened to her cry. Not loud, just soft enough for someone who cared to hear. The next morning, he brought her a plate with eggs and bread. "Thank you," she said. "How long are you keeping me?" "Until I know what is true." She nodded. "Then you might want to ask about the man with the scar on his left cheek and a limp. He's the one who pulled me from the wagon and dropped that satchel when he ran. You saw him. I was hiding under the canvas. I was trying to get out of Phoenix. He was with 2 others. They robbed a supply train. They thought I was asleep. When I heard them talking about killing the driver, I jumped." Quentin narrowed his eyes. "Why would they let you live?" "They did not know I was there until I ran. I got lucky." He looked at her for a long time. "You know, you could have told me that yesterday. I did not think you were the type to listen." He did not say anything, just walked out the door and saddled his horse. 2 days later, the same man Sylvie described was found half dead in a ditch outside of Yuma. He had a scar and a limp, just as she said. The deputy brought word back to Quentin, along with a letter from the marshal confirming the train robbery. Quentin did not go to the jail right away. He sat on the step outside for a long while, arms resting on his knees, watching the dust blow down the street. Then he went inside, unlocked the cell, and opened the door. Sylvie stood slowly. "You are free to go," he said. She stared at him. "You believe me." "I was wrong," he said, his voice quiet. "I should have listened." Her eyes filled, but she blinked fast and nodded. "Does not matter." "It does to me." She stepped past him, then stopped. "You going to arrest the real thief?" "He is already in custody." She nodded again and walked out into the morning light. Quentin watched her go, the way her shoulders stayed stiff and her hands hung at her sides like she still expected to be punished. She did not ask for anything. She did not even look back. That should have been the end of it. But 3 days later, he saw her again. This time, she was helping a boy no older than 7 climb down from a freight wagon outside the inn. The boy had the same dark hair, the same quiet eyes. Quentin approached slowly. "Your son?" he asked. She looked up, startled. "My brother. His name is Liam. Our parents are gone." The boy clung to her skirts. "You heading somewhere?" "Nowhere in particular." "You need a place to stay?" "I will manage." He hesitated, then said, "Sylvie. Look, I have an extra room. My house is clean. Safe. You do not owe me anything, but it is there if you want it." She looked at Liam, then back at him. Why would you do that? He shrugged. You did not steal that money. You jumped off a wagon to protect yourself. You were tougher than you look. And I am not the man who locked you up anymore. She stared at him for a long moment. He saw something shift in her then, like a wall lifting just a little. All right, she said. Just for a few nights. Liam looked up at her, then at Quentin. Is he going to be there too? I live there, Quentin said. Liam nodded. Do you have chickens? I do. The boy grinned. That night, Sylvie slept in the guest room with Liam curled up next to her. Quentin sat on the porch listening to the night sounds, wondering what the hell had come over him. He told himself it was just to make amends. Just to ease his guilt? But when she came out the next morning with a coffee cup in her hand and her hair down, he knew it was not just that. She had not stolen anything. Except maybe his heart. The first morning under Quentin's roof, Sylvie rose before the roosters crow, quiet as a mountain shadow. She washed at the pump behind the house, braided her damp hair back, and borrowed one of the aprons hanging on a nail near the kitchen door. Liam was still curled up in the bed, his thin frame barely lifting the quilt. She let him sleep. Quentin came in from the barn with straw on his sleeves and a saddle blanket over one shoulder. He paused in the doorway when he saw her standing at the stove, coaxing heat through the cast iron. She didn't turn. There was cornmeal in the cupboard, she said. Hope you don't mind. He shrugged the blanket off his shoulder and folded it over the back of a chair. You didn't have to. I know. She scraped the batter into the skillet and watched it sizzle. But I wanted to. He leaned against the wall, arms crossed, watching her work. The way she moved was steady, measured, like someone who'd had to learn how to make do and make it count. I've got work at the jailhouse most days, he said. But I'm usually back before dusk. If there's anything you need, I'll see to things here. I'm not one to sit idle. His mouth twitched, nearly a smile. Didn't figure you were? She took a plate down from the shelf and slid the hotcakes onto it. Liam'll be hungry when he wakes. He never says, but I know when he is. Quentin poured 2 mugs of coffee. He set one on the table near her and stayed quiet while she cleaned the skillet. The silence stretched, but not uncomfortably. You let him sleep in your bed, he said, finally. You always do that? She nodded without looking up. He still wakes from nightmares. Dreams about the fire. Being trapped. He needs to know someone's close. Quentin felt something shift in his chest. You lost your home? We lost more than that, she said, voice low. It was late spring. A lantern got knocked over in the shed. Pa tried to put it out, but the wind had other plans. Ma didn't make it out. Neither did our sister. He didn't speak, just reached for his hat and held it in both hands. We walked to Phoenix after, she said. Took weeks. Slept in barns, ditches, wherever'd take us in. I worked cleaning rooms at a saloon for a while. Then I heard one of the men talking about a job up north. I thought if I could get there, maybe I could make a better start. She paused. Didn't expect to end up in your cell. He sat across from her, not touching his coffee. You were right to run. From the wagon. From everything else. Her eyes finally met his. You believe me now? That's something. I believe you more than most folks I've known 10 years. She didn't smile, but her gaze softened some. That's kind of you to say. He stood, adjusting his belt. I'll be in town till near supper. There's a rifle in the pantry if you need it. It's loaded. I won't shoot unless I have to. He nodded. I know. Later that day, while Quentin posted notices and settled a land dispute between 2 ranchers, Sylvie scrubbed the porch boards and mended a torn shirt of his she found in the wash bin. Liam helped where he could, mostly by chasing the hens back into the yard after they wandered too far. By late afternoon, the sky bruised with the threat of rain. Quentin rode back along the wash, boots and coat speckled with trail dust. He found Sylvie stringing up a line for drying clothes under the eaves, her sleeves rolled and a patch of dirt smudged on her cheek. "You've been busy," he said. "I don't like owing folks." "You don't." She tied off the rope and stepped back. Liam's inside drawing. He found some charcoal in the drawer. Quentin nodded. "I've got some old paper in the desk. He's welcome to it." They stood there a moment, the wind tugging at her skirt hem, the air thick with that scent that always came before desert rain. "Sheriff," she said, brushing her hands clean on her apron. "I'm not looking to stay where I don't belong. You're not. I mean it. I won't wear out your goodwill. You haven't worn anything thin, Sylvie." She watched him carefully, like she was still waiting for the catch. But there wasn't one. Not from him. That night, after Liam went to bed with a full belly and a new drawing tacked to the wall, Sylvie stepped out onto the porch where Quentin sat with his boots off and a tin cup of warm whiskey in his hands. "Mind if I sit?" He gestured to the chair beside him. "It's yours." She curled her legs beneath her and looked out toward the mesquite trees. "I used to think peace was something you had to fight for. But maybe it's something you have to accept when it's given." He turned to her, the lines around his eyes deeper in the lantern light. "Maybe it's both." She didn't answer right away, just leaned back, letting the quiet settle. "You ever lose someone?" she asked. "My brother. During the war. Never made it home." "Did it change you?" "Made me quieter. Slower to believe in things. But I'm learning again." She looked over at him, her face open in a way it hadn't been before. "You're a good man, Quentin. I try to be. You don't have to try so hard." He didn't touch her, didn't reach across that space. But something passed between them anyway. Not a promise. Just the beginning of one. Inside, Liam stirred in his sleep and the first drops of rain tapped gently against the porch roof. Sylvie didn't move. Neither did he. The rain lasted through morning, soaking the red earth and turning the yard to thick, clinging clay. Quentin rose early, fed the livestock, and returned to find Sylvie kneeling by the hearth, coaxing warmth from a slow-burning log. Liam sat beside her, knees drawn up, drawing a horse from memory with a piece of dulled charcoal. Quentin set his hat on the peg and leaned near the stove. "The trail to the west gully's likely washed out," he said. "I'll need to check the fence line before it gives the cattle any ideas." Sylvie didn't look up from the fire. "You'll want to take the lower ridge. Ground holds better there." He raised an eyebrow. "You know the land around here?" "My uncle ran a cattle drive through this territory before he passed. I rode with him for a season when I was 16. Learned where the ground's soft and where it lies." Liam looked up from his drawing. "She can ride better than any man I've seen." Quentin crossed his arms, studying her. "You still ride? When there's a horse worth trusting." He nodded once. "I've got a bay with a level head. If you're not afraid of mud, come with me." She hesitated, then stood. "Let me braid my hair." They left Liam with the neighbor's wife, a widow with 4 sons who'd taken a liking to the boy's quiet nature. Sylvie returned with her braid pinned and Quentin's spare slicker slung over one shoulder. It hung long on her frame, but she didn't fuss with it. The horses picked their way through the shallows of the floodplain, hooves sinking with each step. Quentin led them along the edge of the ridge, where the yucca roots held firm and the wind smelled of mesquite bark and wet iron. "Your brother," he said once they crested the rise. "He said you can ride better than any man." "I had to. My uncle wouldn't let me ride behind. Said if I wanted to see the world, I'd better sit a saddle like I meant it." "You miss it." "I miss the sky. The quiet between towns." He nudged his horse closer. "You could have kept going west. Why stop here?" "I didn't plan to. But then someone put me behind bars and changed my course." He flushed and looked away, jaw tightening. "You've every right to remind me." "I'm not reminding you," she said. "I'm telling you I didn't expect the man who locked me up to offer me shelter or treat my brother like kin." They reached the fence line. A stretch near the arroyo had buckled under runoff. Quentin dismounted and began pulling at the posts. Sylvie stepped down and joined him without needing to be asked. "You ever think about what comes next?" she asked, handing him a length of wire. "Every day. I mean for yourself. Not the town. Not the badge." He twisted the wire tight around the post. "I used to think I'd build a place up in the hills, near the cottonwoods. Enough room for a few head of cattle. Maybe chickens. A porch wide enough to sit on when I'm old." She pressed her thumb against a splinter and winced. "Sounds peaceful." "I reckon it could be." She met his eyes. "You planning to live there alone?" He paused, hands still on the fence. "I used to think so. But I'm not so sure anymore. She didn't speak, but her gaze lingered, steady as the morning sun breaking through the thinning clouds. By mid-afternoon, the fence stood firm again. Sylvie's hands were scratched and her fingernails rimmed with dirt, but she looked more at ease than he'd yet seen her. She mounted smooth as water and glanced down toward the valley. "Your house," she said. "The yard would take strawberries. Soil's right for it." He smiled, slow and quiet. "Then I'll need someone who knows how to plant them." That night, after Liam fell asleep with his drawing tucked under his pillow, Quentin stepped out back to find Sylvie washing her hands at the pump. The lantern light from the kitchen window lit the side of her face, softening the lines drawn by hardship. "I fixed the cracked hinge on the pantry door," she said. "It won't swing open on its own now." He stepped closer. "You like fixing things?" "I like knowing I can." He searched her face. "I never wanted to owe anyone anything. Not since the war. But I think I might owe you something now." She dried her hands on her skirt. "You don't." He reached out, brushed a strand of damp hair from her brow. "I do. For reminding me what it is to let someone in." She didn't pull away. Her voice was quieter than before. "You already did." And when he leaned in, she didn't hesitate. Her lips were warm from the night air, and her hands found his arms like she'd known the shape of him longer than a week. It was not urgent or desperate. It was steady. When they parted, she rested her brow against his chest. "I never thought I'd find a place that felt like choosing." He held her there. "You weren't a mistake, Sylvie. Not the day you showed up, not the day I set you free. You were the answer I didn't know I'd been waiting for." For the first time since the fire, she believed it. The late spring sun had begun to harden the earth again, baking the muddy ruts left behind by the week's rain. Quentin stood at the edge of the field behind his house, watching as Sylvie crouched in the shade of the fence, pressing a trowel into the soil with practiced care. Her braid was pinned up beneath a wide-brimmed straw hat borrowed from the neighbor's wife, and her sleeves were rolled to her elbows, exposing forearms marked by fresh scratches and old scars that looked more like memory than injury. Liam was inside sorting nails by length at the kitchen table, his tongue poked in concentration. He'd taken to the quiet rhythm of the house without being asked. That morning he'd carefully carried water from the pump for Sylvie's washing and fed the hens without a word of complaint. Quentin shifted his weight and cleared his throat. "You think those'll take root?" Sylvie looked up, wiping her forehead with the back of her hand. "If they don't, it won't be for lack of trying. I ordered seed from over in Florence melons, mostly. You'd know what to do with them better than I would." She stood, brushing the dirt from her skirt. "I've never grown melon, but I'm willing to learn." He stepped closer, his hands loose at his sides. "You ever think about teaching? There's talk in town of opening a proper schoolhouse come fall. They'll need someone steady. Someone who can read and keep a room from turning wild." "You think I could do that?" "I think you already are," he said, nodding toward the house. "Liam hasn't gone quiet around anyone else since he came here." Sylvie looked toward the open window where her brother sat, the sunlight catching the curve of his cheek. "He's always been like that. Careful with himself." Quentin hesitated, then said, "You don't need to decide right now. Just something to think on." She gave a small nod, eyes still on the window. "I've been thinking about a lot of things." That evening she found him in the barn, mending a harness strap. She leaned against the stall door, arms folded. "You ever married before?" she asked. He didn't look up. "No, why not?" He pulled the thread through the leather and tied it off before answering. "After the war, I didn't trust myself to build anything lasting. I figured I'd seen too much of what falls apart." She stepped inside, standing near the post, her hands resting lightly on the beam. "But you stayed anyway." "Took up the badge, kept the peace. Seemed better than running." "I know about running." Her voice was quiet but not unsure. "I ran for years. But I'm tired of it." He laid the harness down gently, then turned to face her. The lantern above cast a low amber glow between them. "So stay." "I want to," she said. "But not if I'm just a guest in someone else's life." "You're not." She stepped forward, close enough that the hem of her skirt brushed his boots. "Then tell me what you want." He didn't falter. "I want mornings where I wake to the sound of you humming over the stove. I want Liam growing tall in a place where he's safe. I want to build a home that's ours, not just mine. Her eyes filled, but she didn't look away. I want that too. They didn't kiss then. They didn't need to. They stood in the hush of the barn, the smell of straw and oil between them, and something stronger than promise passed in the quiet. Later, after Liam had gone to sleep and the house had gone still, Sylvie stepped out onto the porch where Quentin was sanding the edge of a new frame for the front window. She sank onto the step beside him, knees drawn close. "I've been thinking about building a coop," she said. "Something better than that leaning thing out back." He smoothed the wood once more and set it aside. "You draw the plans, I'll cut the boards." She smiled, not wide, not for show, but with the kind of ease that meant something had shifted for good. "That sounds like a fair deal." He reached for her hand, fingers rough against hers. "You think Liam would like it here long term?" "I think he already does." Quentin held her hand a little longer than he needed to. "And you?" She leaned her head against his shoulder, the stars beginning to flicker high above the desert ridge. "I think I found what I wasn't looking for." And he knew, without needing to speak, that she wasn't going anywhere else. Sylvie stood at the window, her hands resting on the sill, watching the road where the dust had settled from the last passing wagon. The afternoon was dry and warm, and the cottonwoods behind the barn whispered in the breeze. From the kitchen came the soft tapping of Liam's pencil. The boy bent over a folded map Quentin had lent him from an old drawer. He was tracing the outline of the Arizona territory with careful lines, his tongue caught between his teeth. Quentin came in from the porch, brushing grit from his sleeves. He set a wrapped parcel on the table and nodded toward Sylvie. "Got something from the mercantile. Thought you might take a look." Sylvie crossed the room, untied the string, and unwrapped a folded square of pale cloth. She lifted it, navy calico with a pattern of tiny white stars. "For the school board meeting," Quentin said, watching her reaction. "I figured if you're going to stand in front of half the town and tell them you're ready to teach, you ought to have something that's yours." She ran her thumb along the fabric's edge. "You didn't need to do this." "I know." She looked up at him, and her face softened in a way that hadn't come easily before. "Thank you." He nodded once and poured 2 cups of water from the jug. "You nervous?" "I've never spoken in a room full of men who think they already know everything. Then it's time they met a woman who does." That drew a laugh from her, quiet and short, but real. Later that week, Sylvie stood in the church hall beneath the gaze of a dozen ranchers and shopkeepers seated in borrowed chairs. Quentin leaned against the back wall beside the preacher, arms folded, eyes steady. Liam sat near the front beside Mrs. Wilkes, the widow who'd taken to watching him whenever Sylvie needed the time. "I don't have a formal education," Sylvie said, her voice even. "But I can read, write, and do sums better than most. I've taught a boy to read who once wouldn't speak above a whisper. I've kept a household, patched fences, and I know how to keep order without raising my voice." She let the silence settle. "I'm not asking for charity. I'm offering to do the work. If you're looking for someone who's never made a mistake, I'm not your choice. But if you're looking for someone who knows how to hold fast when things turn hard, I'm standing right here." When she stepped down, the room was quiet for a long beat before the preacher stood, then 2 ranchers, and finally the mayor, who cleared his throat and said, "We'll draw up the papers this week. School starts in September." Outside, Quentin waited until they were alone beneath the cottonwoods. "You didn't blink once," he said. Not even when Old Man Pritchard started chewing on his pipe like he meant to spit fire. She shook her head, smiling. "I was shaking the whole time. Just kept my hands behind my back." "You had them." "I think I did." They walked home slowly, taking the long way around the bend where the creek had finally dried to a thin trickle. Quentin carried his hat in one hand, letting the wind cool his neck. "I've got a thought," he said after a while. "But you can tell me if it's out of turn." "All right. I've been thinking about that piece of land near the cottonwoods. The one I told you about." She glanced sideways at him. "The one with the wide porch?" He nodded. "I'd like to build it. With you. Not just for you. Not for me. For us." She stopped walking. He did too. I don't want to be just a guest in your life, Quentin. You've never been that. I want to raise Liam where he doesn't have to wonder if we're staying. We're staying. She looked at him then, long and full. Then yes. He took her hand, roughened from fence work and dishwater, and kissed her knuckles one by one. They married under the cottonwoods, with Liam standing between them and the preacher reading from a worn Bible. The whole town turned out half to see if the sheriff would wear a tie, he did, and half to see if the woman who once spent a night in his jail would truly marry him. She did. The house went up by late autumn, boards hammered in with the help of neighbors and friends. Quentin built the porch wide, just like he'd said, and Sylvie planted strawberries along the eastern fence where the morning sun hit first. The coop stood straight and solid, with fresh paint and a new hatch. Liam started at the new schoolhouse that September, sitting in the second row while his sister stood at the front in a simple navy calico dress marked with tiny white stars. At night, after the boy had gone to bed, Quentin and Sylvie sat on the porch with their knees touching, watching the wind chase the dust down the road. "You think it'll last?" she asked once quietly. He turned his hand over, palm up. "It already has."